All right, welcome back to the Content That Grows. We're here for another exciting topic with Nate Turner. And I think this one is sort of this inevitable felt feeling if you've ever been highly invested in SEO and you get this sense that like the craft or the practice of it is somehow coming at odds to your overall like other SaaS marketing efforts. And so the way we're kind of framing this is pure SEO versus SaaS marketing. And when do those things kind of come into conflict at each other, and why can that happen? So I was just kind of curious, Nate, if maybe you could fill that out a little more and like explain a little bit about like what's going on here. What are we seeing?
Yeah, I think it's good that you started by using the word the craft, because I do think that's a big part of it. And so when I think of like pure SEO, what comes to mind really is folks who are creating a blog that is to be monetized, or like an affiliate site, in some way that's like they have full control. The entire point in existence of that website is organic search, and that is the driver of revenue. And I think that is like, no matter what, every decision made is going to be made through the lens of SEO. So that's just like pure SEO. And then where that becomes at odds, within a SaaS company is SEO is one piece of the puzzle, and you have to balance that with product marketing, with branding, with conversion. And the reality is that everyone's in that same boat. It's not just an SEO thing. Like there's the brand marketer who wants the most ideal positioning and has their big picture vision of everything. If they could have it just their way, this is how they would do it. And that is because they are good at their craft. But the reality is that you do have to have this compromise between all these things. And I think one of the biggest differences and where it comes down, and where within a company you can have conflicts of perspective and priority, is pure SEOs tend to think more like the end of the line being rankings and traffic. Because like I said before, in an example of an affiliate site or something that's generating affiliate revenue and like AdSense type of revenue, you've kind of accomplished once you get them to your site. Affiliate is obviously one more step removed, but like that's the end of the line. Like you've accomplished that. You got the ad impressions or whatever. Whereas, for for SaaS marketing, it's much more like rankings and traffic don't really do anything. You always say like traffic for the sake of traffic. It's got to be all the way through into business impact with actual leads, pipeline, revenue, and ideally even understanding lifetime value and bringing in quality customers as well. So all of that, I think, really lays the ground that like it can lead to conflicts or just misunderstandings of expectations within a SaaS company when you're kind of dealing with a pure SEO approach versus understanding the balance and the trade-offs, which we'll get into a little bit as well.
Yeah, I definitely feel it in the part you mentioned, which is like conversions and outcomes. Like you were saying, you get these affiliate marketers and you can watch them. They're in our social feeds, right? And sort of side by side with other people who are educating on SEO and agencies and people who are talented at it. And they show monster graphs and they show that like side hustle income report. And I'll see companies sort of sometimes fall into like hiring for those results. So when they initially come in, they'll talk to you about like, hey, we want more traffic because basically we think more traffic equals more leads equals more dollars. And to some extent that's true, right? But it's almost like they hired you with hoping that a framework that would work for maybe a news publishing or affiliate company is what's going to drive results for them. But it's like much more challenging to sell a product. So your CTAs are different and your ability to be spammy is drastically removed. Yeah, the pure SEOs often don't have any identity and brand, and you can't like embarrass your affiliate site because like who cares?
Correct. Yeah, and I like I have no issue with anyone who wants to do affiliate marketing and pursue that. I think, like we said, it's just the when a SaaS company hires more for that skill set or whatever, like that's where you get into issues. And we've certainly seen across the spectrum when I was in house as well as just working with and talking with a number of companies now, like there are still people who have the perspective of like why would we create anything at all as a company that's not optimized for organic search? That's like a kind of a sign, that like you're not seeing the value of like, a data report or like something thought leadership or brand forward that ultimately builds the brand and helps in other ways. And then the other is this idea of like hiding, SEO content on the website and feeling like this is something that just needs to be over here in the corner or like 6 clicks down. Like we don't want people to find it. We only want search engines to find it, which is maddening in and of itself. But I think that's just some things where we see the conflict, again, to kind of continue to play out in that purist SEO approach or mindset versus, what's actually happening within a SaaS company.
For sure. Do you have like specific times when you often see this come up, when there's like a specific SEO practice where you're going to need to have a conversation and these things regularly cause the headaches usually?
I would say there's 3 things that typically come to mind. And I can go into each of them a little bit, but like topic selection, just in terms of like what content's going to be created. Really kind of any page, but like homepage tends to sort of be can be a bit of a battleground in terms of positioning. What do we want to say? What's a really good hook in a headline? Someone wanting, a priority keyword being in the H1 or the title tag, that kind of stuff. And then I think another is just the other marketers or other folks in the company thinking that SEO is something that can be just like done. Like, oh, don't worry, like we'll give you a chance to look at it for SEO before it goes live, versus understanding that it's like a foundational thing that should be, from the beginning in terms of site structure or what platform it's built on or any of that kind of stuff from there. So I would say that's the 3. And kind of going back to the topic selection more specifically, a couple of things that we run into a fair amount. One is, folks really only wanting thought leadership content, as the type of content and like really cutting edge, like forward thinking for the industry, which is fantastic. And every company should absolutely do that. But that shouldn't be the sole, like the extent of your content. And the other is like, I once was talking to a founder and they were like, I don't want any of that 101 crap on my website. Like none of the basics, like that's embarrassing for us to create content. And through conversation, it kind of evolved and helped him understand like, this is not like your platform to impress people with like how much and people are not going to think you only know the 101 stuff because you're writing about it. The reality is like your ideal customer is searching for the 101 stuff, and that's actually how they learn about you, and you help pull them in and show them even deeper expertise you have beyond the 101. Like here's the 101 thing, but were you thinking about X, Y, and Z? Because those are factors too, and really kind of bridge that gap and whatnot. So I think there's a range of stuff there that folks can kind of feel like it's has to be super brand forward, thought leadership, like 401, like highbrow type of stuff. When the reality is you're actually just needing to create content that helps your ideal customer, adds value to them, educates them, solves their problems, whatever it might be.
Yeah, there's a little bit of stop overthinking it.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you need a library, and these things all kind of tie in together nicely. I think to circle back on like a combination of the couple of things, where I often most see the specific examples when, you start talking about where like topic selection meets site structure, and you're inevitably going to start talking about clustering. And sometimes within that topic, it's almost like SaaS content marketers start, when a SaaS content marketer is talking to like their SEO counterpart, they almost develop two vocabularies to talk about the same thing. So like the content marketer may be more familiar with like, oh, we're creating like this like hub about a theme or a topic so that they can navigate, and like they almost use more UX based parts, which we all know is a part of SEO. But then clustering gets into a couple of the more technical components of like bridging entities and making sure all of these internal links have anchor text that point back and forth, and you'll start kind of nerding out into that, which is sort of like seeing the forest for the trees or whatever. You like lose thought when you start to dive too far in. And the other is backlinks, and it kind of, I even see SEOs mess up a little bit on this when trying to like bridge this counterpart, and it's just because people don't always understand the way that backlinks work. But when you're talking about pure SEO, it's like people come to you and they just ask for backlinks. They're like, we know this is important, so like, how do we get a hold of these? How do we buy these? What thing produces these? Without having the like SaaS marketing aspect, which is like, well, if you want backlinks to that, like, are you about to do campaigns about the messaging inside of this? And like, this is really going to be this educational component, and you want to go on podcasts to talk about this topic and promote this, specific piece where it's like, there's a whole ecosystem surrounding that like makes it a craft of marketing. That's not just SEO. We need backlinks.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's, I think for me, the balance, and like where it comes in, like SEO was my first like true discipline, and what really kind of brought me into the entire world of SaaS ultimately. So like I've always had a passion for SEO, and just enjoyed learning that and experimenting and everything that goes with it. But I don't even like, I wouldn't ever want to be in a scenario where it was just purely like, even if it wasn't a SaaS company or like do whatever you want, like I don't ever want to be in that role of like only doing things from the SEO perspective, because of just having experienced, like, I think, at Sprout, we had a very healthy conflict between myself, we had a strong product marketing leader, we had a strong, brand leader. And I think the conflict and the tension was very, very helpful. Because I was thinking not just SEO, but responsible for acquisition. So conversion and SEO, and then kind of had those two pieces, and then they were balancing the others. And I think that most of the time it came out much, much better end product for the company, for users, for everything. Like it was just so much more balanced. And I don't think that it would have been nearly as successful if SEO had just a blank check to do whatever, like I think the overall it would have not gone as well over the next few years. So I actually, I don't think the perspective should be, oh, I wish I had this, like, no guardrails, I could do whatever I want. Like the SaaS company in SaaS marketing is like holding me back. And I think the bigger thing is just sort of embracing the way that it forces you to be better and really make decisions. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a few minutes on sort of the trade-offs and some of that stuff. So, but yeah, anyway, that just came to mind. I just wanted to share that, I guess, that like I think it's a much healthier perspective in a lot of ways, and allows you to overall as a company generate and create a much better product and brand and user experience overall.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think, like you said, I think that bridges nicely into like, what's the look and feel of a company that does go too far in either direction. Obviously, the balance wants to be achieved, but I think we all have sort of felt either way. Like we've felt that experience on a website.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, on like going too far on the SEO side, I think most people generally understand or have experienced to some extent, like just it's almost more of a feeling, like this visceral reaction to like, okay, every feature page is like, whatever, H1, subheading, image, 3 sections, CTA, like just very templatized. Every blog post is the same. Like, so I think there's that aspect. And then hiding SEO content is another one that I mentioned, of just like, from the brand side, like you're just kind of like too protective of everything and not interested in like, how does optimizing content for search fit into everything, and like how do we balance creating optimized content with the quality and level of content we want to put in front of people. And then I think another, going too far in sort of the non-SEO direction is just like refusing to incorporate elements. Like we know what the search intent is for this topic, and like if there's a refusal to incorporate some of those elements that we know would help better align this to search intent, actually satisfy the search that someone has, because there's too much of a bias towards like creative copywriting or something like that. So, I think there's that, and there's so many more examples, like getting into things that aren't focused on conversions, and we haven't talked as much about that side of it, but I don't think we really have time to get into all of that. But I think you can probably formulate ideas in sort of each scenario of like, if it was all about product marketing, it'd be heavily indexed that way. Like here's some areas that might suffer: brand, SEO, conversion. Like there's all those areas that each one could go too heavily in one way.
For sure. Yeah, I think when SEO is done poorly, and it's overly invested in, when I say done poorly, like everything we create is going to be for just that. I think that's when you get into the clunkiness that like people talk about when they sort of bash the creation of content for that specific channel, which is like, oh man, there's keywords everywhere. They keep repeating that same phrase, or like you can even feel it if they're mixing up the phrase, but it's like, why does every other sentence manage to jam the core topic back into my face? Or like every link uses some type of like hyperlink text or anchor text that's the exact keyword they want to use to rank in for this other post, and you just feel like, it's too, templatized was a good way of describing that. And so you feel that clunkiness, where I see the mistake when you don't, like, obviously if you overemphasize a type of like pure content, like a SaaS content, it either comes out really great, it's like exactly what you wanted to say, how you wanted to say it, which absolutely is fine. It's a type of content, but it probably won't rank. And when we get into working with clients who have seen decay, or they just can't figure out why this massive piece of content they put together that's like super, it's robust, it's got all this great data in it, why it won't rank. And as you're like combing through it, you can also feel in that content this element of, man, there's like 7 different types of intent going on here.
Yeah.
And I like, it's not as like cohesive slash like I think it's too much. And so you start to get you get lost while you're reading it because you're either like overwhelmed or now you're on tangential topics that like for you personally, you're like, I didn't really need to know that, but that was a really long section in here. That like you can sort of lose control. It's like SEO does provide guide rails, which is like the part of SEO that often goes misunderstood, right? It's like Google's helping you decide to like shorten or compact or like break up bits because it has a lot of data to say like people enjoy things, you know, if you're searching this specific topic, people like it broken up like this. So you can sort of use both of those ideologies together and blend to get these topics that feel more elegant and well-rounded and shaped that are optimized, but also like exactly what you wanted to say.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's an alarming number of people still who think of SEO as like this dark magic, like, I don't know how you do it, but like you know, put that out there and we, you know, so let's just write this huge, great piece. And like, as you said, that's awesome. And it can be a really, really good resource. But if your intention is also for that to rank and drive organic traffic, then you have to think through the intent aspect of that. So we've seen like a lot of great examples of people who do with well-designed, you know, multi-page, like maybe it's chapters, things that just kind of pull all, like it ends up being a huge, awesome, well-created resource. But behind that, one you know, layer behind that, to your point, is the work to understand what is the intent, how to break that up, and really like have each of those pages or chapters, or however you kind of format it, squarely focusing on the intent behind those searches and kind of satisfying that intent without trying to stuff it all and like, while I have you, let me try and explain everything really quick. And that's really the goal behind it. But there are ways to just be smart and intentional and pull it together so it still feels like a big, impressive resource, but it also has the elements of that. And so that kind of goes back to what I was saying, like, get SEO involved earlier. Like, let's understand what are the ways we could do this to accomplish that versus like, hey, we wrote this thing, please optimize it. And then, you know, from SEO perspective, you get in there, you're like, oh my gosh, like you said, like 7 different intent topics through here, and we're not really covering any of them. So I do think that, yeah, there's a lot there. That's a great example that that it can be a miss, I guess, when you're trying to create this great piece of content, but you had the intention of getting organic search, but you didn't really factor that into it. And so,
Yeah, I think something I want to add to that, especially like the chapters narrative, when we're thinking about divvying it up and each one having its intent. Like another part of SEO that gets a little misunderstood is that like one of those chapters could be your thought leadership piece, you know, and it could not have a keyword focus. Totally. Like those can be within that overall structure, and like that would still be considered SEO, right? Like the ability to make sure that that piece doesn't compete with the intent of other things is still considered search engine optimization, and is really the role that like that manager would take in making sure like, okay, we've integrated some of these other pieces, or our podcasts are connected to these things, our webinars, we've done a nice job of connecting all these pages and hubs. But not all of them have to be this like offensive, keyword focused content creation effort. Like optimization is also just like making sure the whole thing's cohesively working. Absolutely.
And to your point, like, yes, making sure it doesn't ultimately conflict with something else is still part of the SEO perspective. But in that scenario, pulling that in, and maybe that's the chapter that's like the future of X, you know, and then that's where you kind of like pontificate and share your perspective. It's also like a really good opportunity to get a lot more views of that thought leadership content, because you've now tied it to something that, may ultimately end up ranking for 20, 50, 100,000 keywords, that now you have so many more people coming through. And if they're consuming the guide or whatever it is, then like you also kind of get to share the perspective on the thought leadership at a much higher level.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any like rules that you use, especially like if you're coming in consulting on the topic or something, of like how to ensure that SEO tactics are in service to the overall brand, the company goals?
Yes. I would say not like hard and fast rules, but I would say the things that come to mind for me and just from my experience. One is, as a company, if organic search is an important channel and it's an area where it's already important in terms of revenue and you anticipate investing and growing, I think it helps to start a lot of things internally from the SEO perspective. And so the idea behind that essentially is like, let's start with the SEO perspective and just say, hey, here, we want to create an academy, or we want to build a community, or, whatever it might be, this new thing. Let's talk about the SEO aspect first. Let's say in an ideal world, what would we do for SEO? And if when that's explained, everyone's like, cool, yep, good with that, then awesome. Like, you're starting with something that's optimized. But then if there are people that say, hey, this actually feels overly optimized, or like it conflicts with what we would want to do from product, like you get conversion, again, product marketing, brand, all these other voices, and you start to kind of refine there and figure out like what are the trade-offs, like how do you weigh that to ultimately have the best balanced overall. But I think starting with SEO, because like I said, you may have people that are just cool with it, like it works and we go, and you start with something that's optimized. If not, then you kind of figure out how to collaborate together and come up with the best overall product. So I think that's one. Two, I think I try to coach people on this a lot, is like, just understand that a strong brand and clear product marketing help SEO. Like they are just, tailwinds for everything you want to do. And so it doesn't really help to be at odds with those efforts. Like you really just want it all. Cause I think it helps. And it's just a matter of working together, making sure that it does work together, to your point, that you don't like eat into, like create internal competition or like conflicting intent or anything like that. But, overall it's big, and I'm just a big advocate of that. And lastly, if you are in a SaaS company and you are responsible for SEO, make decisions based on business metrics, not SEO metrics. And that's where like I was the one that kind of pushed at one point to like stop trying to track every keyword we rank and like does it move from 5 to 6 or does it go from 3 to 2? Like, who cares? Let's look at trials and revenue and demo requests and pipeline and these things that matter. And yes, it is a proxy to getting those results, but in the long run, it will work so much better if you are concerned more with the business metric side of it than the pure SEO aspect.
For sure. Yeah. And someone in the organization is going to be watching all of that. Like, they're going to be interested in the rankings, and you could see them or move them. But ultimately, the reporting shouldn't be like a giant list of polls.
Totally.
Queries moving up and down, because those will change day to day. I've been in that
Yes.
position where like I'm tracking and sitting in meetings where like, why did it go from 2 to 3?
Yeah.
And then you spend a ton of time trying to hypothesize why that might have went from 2 to 3, only the next week have done nothing, and now you're 3 to 1, and you're sort of, okay, I just wasted 6 hours. Not
exactly. Yeah.
I had nothing to do with business.
It is a good point. Like, yes, if you are responsible for SEO in a SaaS company, you should still be looking at all of the data. It's not an excuse to be like, well, I only look at revenue data. Like, you have to, like, to your point, you have to own your craft and be responsible for that. But, like, no CEO is going to be standing in front of the board talking about, celebrating that on this topic we moved from number 5 to number 2 or something. It's like there's got to be the so what behind it, and so I think that's that. So I would say those are a few that come to mind in terms of those rule of thumb, or to keep in mind for that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the first part, if SEO is important to you and you want to use that channel, I do think it's like draw a hard inked in line for like we're going to be focusing on SEO. Like, everything's going to sort of be viewed as like a possible optimization opportunity, and here's what that would take. Versus sort of the like rough sketch investment where you're like, okay, like we're kind of going to be doing SEO along with some of these other sides, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, because then you just end up not really knowing, and then probably not getting results out of it either.
Yeah, and there was another example. I'm trying to remember. At Sprout, we were creating, within the marketing team, it was being created a more like thought leadership focused blog. So basically like a second publication, like less frequency, whatever, and all that. And so, like I was advocating to just basically like, let's make this thing, like, which is not intended for search, to be as awesome as possible. So it was like, let's actually just put it on a subdomain so that it can just have its own navigation and look however it needs to look, and just make it awesome, like. And so I think, that is an area where a purist SEO could be either basically being like, why are we even bothering creating this in the first place? We're spending time, the team's going to make content that has no chance of ranking. Well, that's not the point of it. And then, the second is like, well, sure, you guys can do that, but we need to our team needs to optimize and create briefs for everything, and it has to be in this subfolder and blah, blah, blah. And it just that's where you just start to crush the intent of it in the first place, which is brand, thought leadership, some of that stuff. So that's where I think, I guess just an example of what I was saying about advocating for brand or just these other things, it's great, but let's just help you put it in a place where you have full control. It won't actually impact, our navigation or anything that we're trying to do on the root domain, that kind of stuff. You can really help. But yeah, I guess, I just want to say kind of overall, maybe more my kind of closing statement is this is a huge part of why we do the things we do, or the way we do things at 10 Speed is, and sometimes it's, a conflict internally, because you're like, well, yeah, I think we could just go crank out a bunch of stuff really fast and check all these boxes and maybe get faster traffic growth for our clients, but we know it's going to be less ICP focused. It's, going to run into more decay and stuff down the line anyway, which just creates more cycles. And to me, it just, I think it's more rewarding and intriguing to work with clients and say, hey, what feature launches do you have coming up? Or, what verticals or use cases are really converting well for you right now, and how can we incorporate that into our roadmap and really, again, sort of align towards the business metrics. And I think it plays better in the long run to say, hey, we know what's working well and generating revenue. We're going to, incorporate more and build more towards that in the strategy and help, set these things up for more long-term success. Feels better than like, hey, we got you these new rankings, or, we got you a bunch of irrelevant traffic or something. So that's where, again, like I said before, like I wouldn't want to be in a pure play SEO situation. And I think that really just comes through a lot in how we approach stuff at 10 Speed.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to work here.
Right on.
I didn't want to be a content mill SEO.
Nope. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that covers most of it.
Yeah, like I said, I think that's kind of my closing thoughts on that. So, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. If you would like to check out any of our prior episodes, visit 10speed.io/podcast. And please like and subscribe on any of the platforms you prefer.